It's the morning of September 8th, 1900, a Saturday. The sun is already baking the Texas Gulf Coast, but something feels off. The ocean has been restless since yesterday. The waves are enormous, thrilling actually, if you don't know what they mean. And the people of Galveston, they don't know what they mean. Families are walking to the beach. Children are running into the surf. The swells are unlike anything they've seen. 6, 8 feet tall, crashing in broad arcs across the sand. It's exciting. It's a spectacle. A Saturday morning show, courtesy of the Gulf of Mexico. By noon, the rain starts. By 3 in the afternoon, the water on the streets is ankle deep. By 5, it's waist deep. And people are starting to realize that the ocean is no longer at the beach. It's in their living rooms. And it is not stopping. By 7:30 that evening, eyewitnesses report the most terrifying thing any of them have ever seen. The water, already chest-deep in places, suddenly rises 4 feet. Not over an hour, not over minutes. 4 feet in 4 seconds. In the darkness that follows, with winds past 100 miles an hour and a 15-foot wall of water swallowing everything in its path, a city of 38,000 people is being erased from the face of the earth. This is the story of the 1900 Galveston Hurricane, the deadliest natural disaster in the history of the United States. It's a story of arrogance, of science, of survival, and of one of the most extraordinary feats of engineering the world has ever seen. I'm Brian, and this is the show where we dive deep into the wildest, most awe-inspiring events that our atmosphere has ever produced. Because weather isn't just meteorology, it's history, it's human drama. It's the force that has shaped civilizations and occasionally reminded us that we are very, very small. Today we're going to Galveston, Texas, in the year 1900. We're going to walk through what happened on that island, hour by hour. We're going to meet the man whose scientific pride may have contributed to the deaths of thousands. And we're going to watch a city fight back against an ocean and literally raise itself up out of the water. By the end of this episode, you will never think about storm surge the same way again. Let's go. Before we get to the storm, you need to understand what Galveston actually was in 1900. Because the image a lot of people have, small beach town, maybe a little isolated, is completely wrong. Galveston in 1900 is a powerhouse, the 4th largest city in Texas with nearly 38,000 people and one of the highest per capita income rates in the entire United States. People called it the New York of the South, and there's a reason for that. Galveston sits on a barrier island off the Texas coast, and its position on the Gulf of Mexico made it something special. The busiest port in Texas, one of the busiest in the nation. Cotton flowed through this city in staggering quantities. Ships from Liverpool, Hamburg, and Marseille all knew Galveston. The main commercial boulevard, the Strand, was called the Wall Street of the Southwest. Grand Victorian buildings, banks and exchanges and hotels, electric streetcars, a medical college, an opera house, a telephone system. This was not a sleepy beach town. This was the future of Texas. And there was one problem with all of it. Galveston Island, this entire thriving metropolis, sat on a strip of land where the highest elevation anywhere was exactly 8.7 feet above sea level. 8.7 feet at its highest point. Most of the city sat at 4 or 5 feet, and it was surrounded on all sides by water. People had worried about this before. Some engineers and concerned citizens had proposed building a seawall for years. But the city had survived storms before, what locals called overflows, when bad weather pushed water across the lower streets. Unpleasant, but manageable. They'd been fine before, they'd be fine again. That was the assumption, and one man had put the full weight of scientific authority behind it. His name was Isaac Monroe Klein, Chief Meteorologist of the U.S. Weather Bureau's Galveston office, trained, credentialed, and deeply confident. In 1891, 9 years before the storm, Klein wrote an article in the Galveston Daily News arguing that the geography of the Texas Gulf Coast made it essentially impossible for a major hurricane to seriously damage Galveston. He called the idea, and this is a direct quote, a crazy idea. The head of the Weather Bureau in a city sitting 8 feet above sea level, surrounded by the Gulf of Mexico, told everyone in print, "Don't worry about it." The seawall proposals were shelved. Development accelerated. And here's the painful part. The natural sand dunes along Galveston's shoreline, modest but a physical buffer against the Gulf, were actually cut down to use as fill elsewhere in the city. Galveston was literally removing its own defenses. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, the storm is being born. Late August 1900, a tropical disturbance appears in the Atlantic, first spotted around August 27th, roughly 1,000 miles east of the Caribbean. It moves westward, enters the Caribbean, crosses Hispaniola, and by September 3rd makes landfall on Cuba, near Santiago de Cuba. And here's something important happens. Cuban forecasters, scientists at the Belen College Observatory in Havana, observe the storm carefully. They see ominous signs, halos around the moon, skies turning deep red, cirrus clouds streaming northward. They warn that this storm is heading for Texas. They are correct. But there's a conflict. The U.S. Weather Bureau has a policy, more or less institutional arrogance, that dismisses Cuban forecast warnings. The warnings are downplayed, not passed on with the urgency they deserve. To be fair to the forecasters of 1900, the tools are genuinely primitive. No satellites, no radar. Ships at sea have no way to transmit weather reports. You're working with telegrams from coastal observers and barometer readings. The science is real, but the data is sparse and slow. Still, the warnings existed, and they were minimized. By September 6, the storm is in the Gulf of Mexico, churning across warm, shallow waters that are hurricane fuel. By September 7th, meteorologists now estimate it reached peak intensity, a Category 4 hurricane, with winds later estimated at 120 to 140 miles per hour. A monster, and it is aimed directly at Galveston. On September 7th, Isaac Klein notices that the swells are wrong. The sea is behaving strangely. To his credit, and we'll come back to this, he does something brave. He raises hurricane flags over the Galveston office without authorization from Washington. He is telling people, in the language of 1900, that something bad is coming. But the warnings come late. Too late for a mass evacuation. Too late for tens of thousands of people with no cars, limited options, and the deep cultural assumption that Galveston will weather anything. September 8th dawns. Partly cloudy. The waves are enormous. People head to the beach. Let me walk you through this day, because I think you need to feel it. Morning, September 8th, 1900. The tide is higher than usual. The waves are spectacular, big, dramatic, rolling swells that residents find thrilling. This is documented. People go to the beach to watch the ocean. They marvel at its power. They have no frame of reference for what that ocean is about to do. By mid-morning, the rain rolls in. The wind picks up. Streets near the shore are starting to flood. Just a little, just a nuisance. Galveston has had overflows before. People move their things to higher shelves and carry on. And this is when Isaac Klein, by his own account, climbs into his horse-drawn cart and drives through the low-lying neighborhoods warning people to leave, to get to higher ground, to get into brick buildings. He later wrote that he did this because he could see the barometer and he knew what it meant. Whatever his failures were before, and they were significant, in his own telling, this is a man trying to undo them. By 3 in the afternoon, the water is waist-deep on much of the island. People are moving, but there's nowhere to go. This is an island. The bridges to the mainland are already compromised. You can't drive off. What you can do is find the sturdiest building you can reach and hold on. The houses near the shoreline go first. The storm surge isn't a dramatic single wave. It's a rise, a relentless, unstoppable rise of the ocean's level across the entire island. The Gulf of Mexico is climbing, swallowing everything. And then the debris starts moving. Those wooden Victorian homes, torn from their foundations, become weapons. Massive timber and nail missiles, driven by current and wind, slamming into the houses behind them. Those houses collapse and join the pile, which slams into the next row. Block after block, the storm lifted debris from one row of buildings and hurled it against the next, until 2/3 of the entire city had been destroyed in this chain reaction. People caught in it were hit by hurtling bricks and lumber. Some, and I'll say this plainly, because these were real human beings, were decapitated by flying slate tiles. By early evening, a 3-mile-long, 30-foot-tall pile of wreckage lies across the middle of the island. It has been built by the storm from the city. And then comes 7:30 p.m. Eyewitnesses, people who survived to tell this, report that at approximately 7:30 in the evening, the water rose approximately 4 feet in 4 seconds. Think about what that means when you're already chest-deep in floodwater. In 4 seconds, everything manageable became unsurvivable. By 8:30, 5 more feet poured into portions of the city. The anemometer, the wind speed gauge on the Weather Bureau building, had blown off at 6:15 p.m. after registering 100 miles per hour. Klein himself estimated winds reached at least 120 miles per hour after the gauge blew away. Later meteorological analyses put the peak closer to 140 miles per hour. The storm surge, over 15 feet. An island with a maximum elevation of 8.7 feet. Do that math. Survivors describe the night in fragments, holding onto rafters as houses spin in the current, lashing themselves to wreckage, hearing voices in the dark, and then not hearing them. One survivor, Milton Elford, later wrote about how his entire family, mother, father, young nephew, were with him in a brick house they believed would hold. It didn't. He was the only one who surfaced. That is the night of September 8th, 1900. When the sun rises on September 9th, it rises on something that barely resembles a city. The bridges to the mainland, gone. The telegraph lines, gone. The streets are buried under debris, and everywhere, there are bodies. The death toll is still debated. In a city of 38,000 people, a minimum of 6,000 died. A population survey in early 1901 documented a loss of over 8,000. When you add visitors, port workers, and people who fled and never returned, some estimates reach 12,000. The most commonly cited figure is 8,000 dead. For comparison, Hurricane Katrina killed approximately 1,500 people. Galveston 1900 was potentially 5 times worse. The bodies were too numerous to bury individually. Workers loaded them onto barges and took them out to sea. The bodies washed back. In the end, they built funeral pyres, burning the dead where they lay in the debris for weeks. Galveston was completely severed from the mainland. No communication, no help coming in, just a city sitting in its own devastation, waiting for the rest of the world to notice. And then, Galveston decides not to die. The citizens make a decision that is breathtaking in its audacity. They are not going to abandon the island. They are not going to simply rebuild what was there. They are going to do something that had never been done at this scale, anywhere in the world. They are going to raise the island. First, the seawall. In January 1902, engineers present their recommendation: a curved concrete seawall rising 17 feet above mean low tide, stretching over 3 miles along the oceanfront. Construction begins September 1902. On July 29, 1904, the initial segment of the Galveston seawall is complete. But they don't stop there. A seawall protects the shore. What protects the city behind it? The answer: raise the city. Engineers build a canal through the center of the island and dredge millions of cubic yards of sand from Galveston Bay, pumping it as slurry underneath the city. To make room for all that sand, they jack up the buildings. More than 2,000 structures, homes, businesses, churches, are lifted on hand-turned jack screws. The buildings are raised. The sand is pumped underneath. The island's grade is raised by as much as 17 feet in some areas. They raised the island to meet the seawall. Then they waited. 1909, a hurricane strikes. The seawall holds. Damage, but survival. 1915, another direct hit. The seawall holds again. That year, with the seawall and raised grade in place, Galveston's death toll, 8 people. 8, compared to thousands in 1900. The engineering works. But I want to be honest about what the storm cost beyond lives and property. In the years after 1900, investors look at this island city, an island surrounded by water, struck by hurricanes, and they go somewhere else. They go to Houston. Houston, 30 miles inland. The Houston Ship Channel is built. Houston grows. And Galveston, the New York of the South, the Wall Street of the Southwest, fades from the front rank of Texas cities. The crown it wore passes to Houston and never comes back. So what does this storm teach us? The first lesson, the one every meteorologist will tell you, is this. In a hurricane, the wind is not what kills most people. The storm surge is. Storm surge is what happened in Galveston. It's what happens when a hurricane circulation piles the ocean up and drives it on shore. The low pressure at the storm's center acts like a vacuum, slightly lifting the sea surface. The wind drives massive waves toward the coast, and all of that water has nowhere to go except land. In Galveston's case, land that was only 8.7 feet above the water to begin with. When meteorologists today issue storm surge warnings, when they say, this area could see 12 feet of surge above normal tide, they are thinking about exactly this, about the math being that simple and that brutal. Barrier islands are catastrophically exposed to storm surge, and tens of millions of Americans live on coastlines with similar vulnerability today. The second lesson is about the cost of dismissing expert warnings. In 1900, the tools were primitive, but the warnings existed. Cuban forecasters saw this storm coming and told their American counterparts exactly what was about to happen. Those warnings were dismissed for institutional reasons, for national pride. Isaac Klein spent the rest of his career living with his 1891 article, the one that told a city of 38,000 people that a devastating hurricane was an absurd delusion. That article shaped how a city thought about its vulnerability, and that shaped how many people died. The third lesson is about what genuine resilience looks like. Galveston's response to this storm drove real innovation in American hurricane preparedness. The seawall, the grade raising, the commission-style city government they developed in the aftermath, these were templates for how American cities could respond to catastrophe. The modern National Hurricane Center, the entire apparatus of American storm warning, it owes a debt to September 8, 1900, because Galveston made it undeniably, tragically clear that the Gulf of Mexico demands respect, study, and preparation. The weather doesn't care about our assumptions. It never did. It never will. I find this story genuinely overwhelming in the best possible way because it contains everything. The hubris of expertise weaponized against common sense. The physics of water and wind at scales almost impossible to imagine. And the sheer human audacity of a city that decided, after the worst day in its history, to rebuild higher. The 38,000 people who woke up on that Saturday morning, walked to the beach, marveled at the waves. They faced something they had been assured would never come. Many of them died. Some of them survived, and they built a seawall. They jacked up their churches on hand-turned screws and pumped the ocean floor underneath them. That's the story. That's why weather matters. If this episode moved you, if you sat forward in your seat at any point, please share it. Send it to a friend. Post it. Tell someone what storm surge actually means, because understanding that is genuinely important, and the more people who get it, the better. Subscribe wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It genuinely helps other curious people find the show. Next time, we're going somewhere cold. One of the most violent blizzards in American history, a storm that shut down an entire region and rewrote the rules on winter preparedness. You're not going to want to miss it. I'm Brian. Thanks for listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. Stay curious, stay safe, respect the weather.